Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is so exciting to be back here with your Diamond Mentor moment. Yes, this is a diamond or replica of a diamond. Excited to be here. It's been a while. I have been traveling and teaching and facilitating and keynoting around the nation for the past 2 or 3 months, really just getting intercultural creativity and now neurosomatic creativity in our prismatic leadership program out there in the world to help leaders and team members be their best creative best with one another. So today, for our Diamond Mentor moment, we are just going to jump in and talk about things that affect your creative thinking and your ability to connect well with one another. Let me add the PowerPoint to the screen. I am talking about how accents, yes, accents influence our perception of people and their creative potential. Have you really thought about that? About just your interaction with how you speak, how other people speak, and how people may speak with just different accents from around the country, around the world, and what that means all the way to the neurological level. Those of you who have seen my work or seen me speak, you know I travel with a brain. I have two, one in here and one right there. And so let's just jump in. Creativity is it, right? In the essence of it all. That's what we really are looking for people to be at their creative best, but even now more so than ever. The World Economic Forum came out with this at the beginning of the year, the top skills needed in 2023. And about 10 years ago, creativity was, hanging on around number 10. And then slowly you see it inch up to almost the top spot. And if you look at all of these titles, these topics for all of the skills needed, especially for your leadership in 2023 and beyond, you're looking at resilience, flexibility, agility. You're looking at motivation and self-awareness, curiosity, lifelong learning, dependability and attention to detail, empathy, active listening, leadership and social influence, right? So besides two of these, right, tech literacy and quality control, the rest are all cognitive skills. And it's funny how when we graduate or promote people, especially from middle management, we're promoting them for a lot of times their technical skills, but we really need to hone in on their quote unquote soft skills. Hopefully we're not using that term too much anymore, but these cognitive, creative, social skills that they need. And so we're going to be talking about an element of that affects leaders, affects leadership in all areas. I am a lover of words, of the etymology of words. And those of you who have seen my work know I always want to make sure you understand what I mean when I say creative thinking and cultural development. Creative thinking is not just artistry. We love artistry. I'm an artist myself, but that's just a part of it. Creative thinking, we're proposing, is your process or your ability to problem find and problem solve with relevance, value, and novelty, right? So you can do that with the arts. You can do that in any type of field, in any type of level. And so I have a wonderful book that I just finished called Tomorrow Mind by Dr. Martin Seligman and Dr. Kellerman. And they're just really looking at stuff that I wrote in my own book, 2 years ago. We need to look at everyone being creative. What does that look like? There's not just a creative team. There's not just a creative director. If you're an accountant, you're a creative. You're in operations, you're a creative. If you're in the janitorial staff, you are a creative. How do we give everyone that title? Because that's what our workforce needs. And so creative thinking sits on a lot of skills such as, reframing, metaphorical thinking, imagination, perspective shifting, unusual associations, combinatory thinking. All of those areas involve creative thinking. And so that means it's a skill. You can teach it and it should be taught. But what can affect it? That's what we're talking about today. The other area of my work, because it's intercultural creativity, is about cultural development. And I'm really expanding that term to include cultural competency, cultural awareness, cultural humility, cultural responsiveness, but also cultural compassion, right? How do we have compassion for people with different lived experiences than us, different ethnicities and different other demographics? What does it look like to not just want to connect, but really act and serve and support? And so cultural development, we're proposing the definition: your ability to observe similarities and differences with with relevance and perplexity and complexity, and you're able to adapt your behavior in various cultural situations. So that's what we're looking at as far as cultural development, and that's what I mean. And so the work that I'm presenting is intercultural creativity, which is the intersection of those two, because they sit on the same set of cognitive skills. A lot of those skills that you saw on the list from the World Economic Forum, right? Adaptation, curiosity, observation, attention to detail across all the spectrums. And so we're going to touch upon that. What really influences that and affects the creative contributions of your workforce? Talking, communicating, right? Sharing ideas, getting them across. So much is going on there. As you saw my brain before, fMRIs are showing us a lot that we weren't aware of 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. And a lot of times we see what's going on in one person's brain with the fMRIs and them doing experiments and tests. But now we even have the technology, I think with it's called FNIRS, right? To see what's going on both brains, two people's brains, while they're interacting with one another. And so there's a lot of neuroscience is doing a lot of work in that area with Dr. Matthew Lieberman, my UCLA professor, being one of them, the social aspect. And so that's really what I wanted to talk about today. So we have to be more mindful of what goes on under the hood. What does that look like when we do all of our work in leadership training, inclusion training, and all that good stuff? All right. So sound is powerful. A lot of people don't think that sound is as powerful as it is because it's invisible. But gravity is powerful and it's invisible, right? A lot of the forces that we interact with from day to day, and sound is very, very, very powerful. So how does your hearing work? A lot of people think that your hearing works just from frequency sound waves going into your ear, shaking your little bones, and there's liquid in there that moves little hairs and transfers it to electrical signals and sends it to the brain. And then your brain figures out what's being said. And so what we have found out, pulling from the work of Dr. Nina Kraus, what we have found out is that it's not a one-way street. There's actually a two-way pathway going on in your head. So not only is there external information, external data coming in as sound waves and being processed and turned into electrical waves and going to your brain is communicating the other direction as well. That is huge. And for those of you who have been in my workshops, I show some clips from the brain, from Dr. David Eagleman, and some other clips from Dr. Nina Kraus, showing you that it's a two-way pathway. And so here's a picture of the thalamus. It's the gatekeeper, basically, of all your senses except your smell. Your smell is the only sense that really goes straight to the brain. There's no gatekeeper. But your vision and your other senses go through the thalamus. The thalamus does a little bit of judgment control and then sends it to where it needs to go. What they found out is that, like I mentioned before, not only is it going in that direction, but if you watch the wonderful documentary by Dr. David Eagleman, he talks about how your brain is sending 6 times the amount of information the opposite direction. So it's dwarfing the amount of information that's coming in from the outside. So that's a lot, but what does that mean? When we hear accents, when we hear the tone and the timbre of people's voices, our brain is steadily giving us judgmental information about that. Like if you've ever picked up the phone, and I can easily tell, like, oh, this person sounds Black, or oh, this person sounds like they're from here, like automatically without even seeing them. And that is key, because whatever previous beliefs, whatever prejudices or biases or whatever is already in my brain, that is being fed down to my ears and being fed down to my eyes through the thalamus, which is really, really, really important. And so the first step is awareness. But I want to show you some examples of what happens when we hear different types of voices, and especially different types of voices with accents, and not just foreign accents, even accents from around your own nation. For me, I'm in the United States of America, so Southern accents or Northeastern accents. What does that look like? So let's just see a small clip that I would like to show.
This to the test. Sharks existed at least 10 million years before trees did. What do you think? Is this true? Now, here are some other statements read by different people. After each one, decide for yourself, true or false.
On Saturn, it rains diamonds.
Babies don't dream.
Human blood contains gold.
The national animal of Scotland is the unicorn.
Hair and fingernails keep growing a while after we die.
How did you decide? The first thing you probably did was just try to remember. What do you know about fossils or space or Scotland? What have you read about the dream worlds of children or the elements composing the human body? But your mind was also doing something else without you knowing. It was analyzing things that had nothing to do with the statements you heard, and a lot to do with who said them. Who is this person? Does she sound smart? Can I trust him? And to find clues to these questions, one of the things your brain likely attended was the voice. You see, voices aren't just sounds, they're auditory faces. And like the face, they can give us clues to things like age, gender, and emotion. They can also result in impressions that are just wrong.
On Saturn, it rains diamonds.
Did you think this was true? What does credibility sound like?
On Saturn, it rains diamonds.
On Saturn, it rains diamonds.
On Saturn, it rains diamonds.
Accents. What we think they tell us, what they actually tell us, and why we need to care.
Accents. Why do we need to care? What is there, and how is it affecting the way that we connect, create, and contribute with one another? And so I wanted to show that. That's just a wonderful clip about how our brain is analyzing not just the words being said, but who is saying them. And if you can't even see the person, it's pulling in all of this extra information. And then your brain is making judgments without you sometimes even being aware. And so the reason why I want to talk about this today is because I was at a conference and talking to a woman who had a thick Russian accent. And we were just talking. I told her the work that I did about the psychological aspects of creative thinking and connecting with people from different lived experiences. And she shared, she was like, you know what? Honestly, there's times when I don't speak up because just my accent. I know people are going to judge me. I know people may take what I say not at face value. They may not take me seriously, or the credibility may not be seen because of my accent. And you can really hear the struggle with that. And I wonder if, other people are having that same experience. There's so many other demographics that, yes, you come into a room, you're ready to share your great ideas, but there's these outliers that are affecting the way that people are construing your contribution. And that's why I'm talking about it, because intercultural creativity is just that. How do we become aware of these hidden influences and mitigate them and help them lose their power so we can get the best ideas out there? What does that look like? And people are dealing with executive presence and confidence and just being able to be credible. And so understanding what the brain is doing. That's why I'm so big on the neuroscience, understanding what the brain is doing. Now you're able to really stop, slow down, and really inquire with yourself. Okay, why am I feeling this way? What evidence do I have of this? And here's another big thing. When you really get serious about doing work in this area, you can now analyze what media or what input have I had that gave me that prejudice of this particular accent. What does that look like? There was a research paper that I read a while ago. I don't even know where it is, but they looked at how people rate credibility and intelligence just by the sound of the voice that they're listening to. So people with a British accent would have been rated as more intelligent than someone with an accent from a different location. And a lot of it is due to media, to movies, to how characters with these accents are often portrayed, right? The brain hooks on to anything that is repetitive, and the subconscious hooks on definitely to anything that is repetitive. So keep that in mind, really analyzing your own lived experience, especially from your formative years, that will give you insight to how you react and how you perceive the credibility, the intelligence, and the creative contributions of those around you, especially those of you with accents from around the nation and also around the world. We are excited to talk about our next children's book that has come out this month. We're doing a huge book launch at The Grove in Los Angeles at the beginning of August. I believe it's August 5th at The Grove, but it's called My Brain, My Beautiful Brain. And so the first part of the book, which we'll talk more about it when it's just talking about the book, but the first part of the book is for, kids or the inner child. We call these inner child books, but the last part of the book, I write directly to the adults, right? The parents, caretakers, or caregivers, leaders, and teachers. And the reason why I do that is so you know what's going on under the scene within the brain. And the reason why I'm bringing up the book right now for this topic is because I want to talk about how, if you have a foreign accent, right? Meaning, at least in which we all have an accent depending on where you go. If I go to Australia, I will have an accent because I do not speak the cultural norm accent type down there. But I am in America right now, so I do not have an accent as far as what that concept really means. But if you have an accent because of English is your second language, I want to make this point. Creativity is transferred through language, through communication, right? And we talk about multiple forms of communication: music, visual art, and of course, writing and verbal communication and physical communication, right? Body communication. The more methods that you have as these idea carriers, I believe, the more creative potential that you can have. In the book, My Beautiful Brain, one of the pages talks about linguistic intelligences, right? We celebrate a lot more intelligences than just logical or academic intelligence, but linguistic intelligence. And the book says, if I need the right words to explain my creations, I tap into language and connect across nations. And so I want to just celebrate people who are multilingual, and maybe English is not your first language, or maybe English is your first language and you're fluent in other languages, or you're working on becoming fluent in other languages. Here is what's going on in your brain. What does that look like? So with your multilingualism, it highly affects the brain. Highly. Dr. Nina Kraus says it's a superpower along with music for your brain, right? It increases your white and gray matter. Your brain actually changes shape because you are learning a new language. It enhances executive function, which occurs in the prefrontal cortex, and that's responsible for your decision-making, your imagination, your planning, and just your ability to strategize and really just think creatively. And it just really enhances, I believe, your emotional intelligence as well. Like you're able to hear nuances and able to think along those lines. Another thing to be aware of is if you have multiple languages in your brain belt, right? Like your tool belt. That's actually a good phrase. I should write that down. If you have more languages in your brain belt, then you actually have more tools to manipulate data And so this is an example by a TED Talk that I saw. And she talked about how the colors that you see on your screen, we English speakers would just label them all blue, right? Of course, some's light blue and maybe some's dark blue. You might do the last one just like a navy, but we would always really just look at those and say blue. Well, in the German language, they have two separate names for both of these groups of colors. Like your lighter blues are Goluboy, and your darker blues are Cine. And the fact that they have a higher discrimination of these two colors affects how they see the colors. And so what we know is that when they do any type of visual discrimination tests, they're faster at it because their brain they've put more boundaries between the colors, and they're more specific about it. Whereas to an English speaker, it's just all blue. So keep that in mind, that multiple languages, it's giving you really an extra set of tools to connect with one another, to create with one another, and to observe your world. Another thing to be mindful of if you're multilingual is that it affects how you observe objects, right? And so if you look at the sun, the word the sun in English, the sun and moon, they're just your nouns. We don't really have any type of gender identification in front of these nouns, whereas other languages, they do have a gender identification, such as Spanish and German. So in Spanish, the sun, el sol, it's masculine, right? And the moon, la luna, is feminine. But in German, it's switched. So what does this mean for your creative thinking and your ability to just to create and to label and to describe things? They're saying that if your language has something that is gendered masculine, when you describe it, you're more likely to use masculine type of words, like, it was built strong and sturdy. And if it's more feminine, you're more likely to use feminine types of descriptive words. And so that's something to be mindful of. I think it's a benefit. So if I have a Spanish speaker on my team where they speak English and Spanish, they may be looking at an object from both of those languages or from their primary language. If Spanish was their first language, that may be influencing how they're interpreting that object, which that may not be an influence of mine. And so it's just, once again, another perspective, right? That's one of the gems of the 7 gems of intercultural creativity. How do you shift perspective? That's a creative skill. And if you have someone with multiple languages, I believe they're able to shift even more because they have 2 subsets of idea carriers to shift with. So being mindful of that. So I just wanted to share that part, because if you are multilingual and if you do have an accent when you speak English, that's nothing to be ashamed of. You are actually steps ahead. You have a more gray and white matter in your brain. You have more idea carriers. You're able to connect with more people because you speak the language of that group. And so that's why yo estudié en Costa Rica y España. Mi hijo habla español. My son speaks, or at least he spoke Spanish. He kind of lost some of it. But, when he was 3 months old, I told him, do not speak a word of English to him whatsoever. And I did that intentionally because whatever you're being exposed to in your primary years, that sets the foundation, the structure. So my son has a structure of Spanish, even though he doesn't speak it as much anymore, but he still has a structure. So if he jumps back into it, that structure is still there for him to build upon. So keep that there. Keep that in mind. So that is basically all I have for you. It's a Diamond Mentor moment. It's really, really quick. It's supposed to be like 15 minutes, but it's my first time back. So I'm explaining some more basic information. We are the developers of intercultural creativity, neurosomatic creativity, and for 2024, prismatic leadership, right? How do you be a prism and let the colors of those you lead shine out and shine bright? That is our work. We keynote speech. We have a team of about 8 to 10 speakers and trainers and curriculum developers and data data folks, just people doing amazing things and just ready to really support the World Economic Forum stats of how do we get companies with these skills, these cognitive skills, right? These psychological skills, and getting them prepared to do the work that they need to do. Don't forget, the new book is out, My Brain, My Beautiful Brain. You can go to Cafe Strategies or JanineLetford.com if you want a signed copy from Sean and myself. This is a family affair. My husband helped with the illustrations, and we even have a quote from Dr. Michael Platt out of the Wharton Business School, or the Wharton Neuroscience Initiative, talking about the book. And it was really excited to share some of this work with some of the neuroscientists that I follow and I learn from. So I just wanted to thank you for joining me for this Diamond Mentor moment. I hope you learned a thing or two. Celebrate people who have accents, right? Celebrate people who have multiple languages. Celebrate people who are here to create together and offer their lived experience, their knowledge, and their wisdom. I will see you next time for your Diamond Mentor moment. Bye-bye.